Thursday ThoughtFLOW begins here and now. I really am having lighting trouble though. Oops. All right, we'll see how this goes. Hi guys, it's ThoughtFLOW. It's Nicki. Here she comes. Da-da-da. She's coming. I think. I don't know what I'm doing here. Ha! It worked. Hello.
Yes. Hey, what's going on?
I mean, look at my background. It's fabulous.
It is. I
I
know, mine is like, okay. Sorry, my iPad is like super crooked. Okay,
It's
there.
been working. It's working. We're celebrating the wins today. You know, I gotta say,
So you,
what was that?
as you say, you do know you introduced us as ThoughtFlow Thursday.
I don't know what fucking day it is. I mean, I've lost 3 times today because I can't remember if I did it before. But then I realized after I throw the pick away, it's been 3 times now. So, like, I'm having some time and date issues today, apparently.
That's all right.
Listen, I was Captain Crabapple until about 1 second before I hit go. And then I was like, oh, yeah, we're going to chat for the next little bit. So now I'm feeling better.
Awesome.
Good. It's good stuff. Hi, Harm. Yeah, it's a gorgeous day in the neighborhood, and it's Friday. And I know I said we were going to talk about SouthLake and all kinds of other stuff, but there's always other things to talk about. So what's happening in your neck of the woods, love?
Oh my gosh. Not much. Other than, just crazy school stuff, but that's not new. But I guess I'm a little astounded by reports that I keep seeing of like thousands of people who are walking away from career level jobs because they don't want to be vaccinated.
I
And
mean,
I say career level because I don't really view like, flipping burgers as,
you
unless
mean like
it's your
skilled
restaurant.
nursing and those sorts of things.
Correct, correct. They're walking away from career level jobs. Not like a handful of people. It's like some pretty decent numbers for people who are just like, nope, I don't, I'm good.
Yeah, it's I mean, can we really be shocked at this point? Um, I don't I don't think I'm getting to the point where there's nothing that can shock me about any of this, but what really is starting to get me is the idea that, Joe Sandwich knows more than, hi Robin, knows more than anybody else. And anyone that knows me knows that I trust nothing. I mean, I trust nothing. I believe very few. Um, so I get skepticism. I get all of it to a point. But, if it's like the demon blood lady or Dr. Fauci, you can call me a kid all day because I look at the bags under these eyes and I'm like, there's nothing childlike about this damn luggage right here. But yeah, so Joe Sixpack, who can't spell science and didn't really do so great in school, SKUL. I mean, I'm not buying it. Now, that said, not all deniers are ding dongs. Not at all. I think there's some really, really smart people denying for really good reasons, or skeptics for really good reasons. And I've said it before, our government is not known for being wed to truthiness.
Right.
But at the same time, once again, when there's a public health crisis, we have to activate like we're in a crisis, not like it's another Tuesday.
Correct.
And today is still Friday. I keep forgetting. So, you know, it's just so messy. And, hey, kudos to these people who are so wed to their convictions that they're going to walk away from their jobs. Because you know what? I heard there's a lot of Starbucks with a lot of vacancies. Chick-fil-A in our town is closing now at 7 p.m. and people are shook. They don't know how to behave themselves. So, maybe some of them can go work for those places. I don't know. Let's see how quickly they get vaccinated after they have to do work like that.
Yeah, and it's also, I'm like, I guess I feel like, so where do all of these people go to work? Like, where, how, not, no, scratch that. Some of them have to be family people, right? And then it's like you have this job and it has these benefits because in this country we have people pay to have certain, healthcare things like that. And they really shouldn't be called benefits.
Right.
Um, but
Well, no, they would call them entitlements.
right. And it's really funny because like other people in other countries, those socialists where the government pays for their health care, they actually get to take their whole check home. I digress. But I'm like, where do they work? And let's say that some of these people have like 10 years under their belt, right, working for some of these companies. So I'm like, where do you go to recoup that 10-year loss?
Well,
And
I mean, if they're breadwinners, they're not leaving their jobs. The breadwinners are the ones that are like, yeah, no vax, no vax. Hey, I'll be right back to this protest. Come on, hit that up. I mean, let's be honest about it. Those people that really need those jobs aren't walking away from those jobs. And if somebody's listening to this and you really needed your job, but you walked away from it and you're planning on taking food stamps, I would like to hear all about how that's going to work for you and your
yes,
family.
thank you, because that's where I was going with that. So then let's say that there's a small percentage of people who are in that position that you just discussed, and they're now going to seek assistance from the government. So you decide to leave your job because you don't want to be vaccinated, but and now you're on like extra government assistance. And so now you're going to increase the burden on the healthcare system because when you contract COVID and you now cannot afford to eat really good food, so you eat fast food all the time or lesser than food. So now you're going to be an extra burden on the healthcare system because you don't have your benefits.
Well, but you're entitled to that. See, because what I notice is it's always okay to drain the system if it's for you. But somebody else who has a need, they're just fill in the blank, lazy, dumb, lazy and dumb, useless, unskilled. If a person walks away because they're standing on principle, that's what they're saying this is, and then they take an entitlement, I don't like the term, on principle, then therefore it is considered, I'm assuming, a principled reason why they would do these things. And therefore it's way different from somebody who's just fallen on hard times, because clearly those people are idiots. That's the hypocrisy of the argument that I can't tolerate.
And I don't, and for those, I know that for some, there's an option to get tested, like I think it's like every third day or something like that. I'm just going to chime in here. That's an expense on the company that's hired you. That is an expense. That is an egregious expense. It's not 5 people. In some companies, it's hundreds of people. In some companies, it's thousands of people. So thousands of people have to go in, get tested, and then the company has to pay for that.
But the company doesn't have to. I mean, people are really proud of the fact that they're putting these companies over the barrel. I think the companies that choose to fire these folks are right, because they shouldn't have to shoulder that expense. Let's decide, we can't say we want our companies to pay for this and not for that. Pay for my COVID test, but I don't want you to pay for her birth control. It's completely running around in circles. Like, draw the line. And again, with the law being the way it is, these companies could be exposed to lawsuits over time.
And yes, Robin, the company should pay for it. Pardon me, the
Not the
employee
employee.
should, yeah, I'm sorry, the employee should pay for it. And then the other expense that the company will have. I actually know of a company that is having these conversations right now. The other expense that the company will have is invariably, of course, we know someone will test positive for COVID. And so then they have to pay for contact tracing. And then there is a cost that the company cannot escape, and that is X number of people who were exposed now have to go someplace for 14 days. And where are they in that company and how are things affected? Well, if this is a factory or a line job, right, then that means that I know a company where like the entire third shift was almost shut down,
Yeah.
and so
And then the
that's just
ripple of,
rinse.
yep.
Right, rinse, wash, repeat. And so that begins to affect productivity for
Or you're
that company.
a parent.
Yeah,
You're a single parent working on a line, doing the best you can do. Now you're on ice for 10 to 14 days because, contact tracing says you've got to stay at home.
right,
Well, then what happens? Your kid can't go to school either. That,
right,
the ripple effect
right.
is huge. If it's a company
Yes.
policy, Robin says that you must be vaccinated, then they have just cause to fire you.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's 100% the truth. And you
Mm-hmm.
cannot collect unemployment. That too is the truth. But that doesn't stop you from then applying for other types of assistance. You still have to keep, from what I know of it, which isn't that much, you still have to keep applying for additional work. But you're probably not going to get it, not at that price point that you're used to working at. So you go from a nursing position to the grocery store bagging. There's going to be a huge deficit that has to be made up, and you're going to have to find supplemental means.
Or unfortunately, just because of the type of career that you spoke about, nursing, unfortunately, I feel like maybe you could go into a nursing home because it's like the rules for nursing homes seem to be trapped somewhere between the underverse and like
You mean the
I don't know.
upside down? Yes,
The
for
upside
sure.
down, the underverse. That's from no, it's from a cartoon. But
Oh,
like but yes, trapped somewhere between the underverse and the upside down, where gorgons, run free and little trolls hide under, bridges. The rules for nursing homes seem to just be like, oh, let's ask the preschoolers what rules we should have. So yeah, it's a very strange conundrum, and there is a huge ripple effect. And there is that thing of, once again, not only people feeling entitled, but also just a lack of compassion.
yeah. Well,
you
in all
know
ways, I think that lack of compassion goes in all directions. There's a lack of compassion for people who get sick.
hmm
You know, people who get sick are feeling branded, and, they don't want to mention it because it's so terrible the way people look at them. People who have been vaccinated don't want to tell their unvaxxed friends. People that are vaxxed don't want to tell their, you know what I mean, whatever.
right.
And it's I think that we are in a place where nobody can hear a thing anymore. Nobody wants to hear a
hmm
thing. I don't, I'm not feeling a whole lot of sympathy for people who are flagrantly taking their lives into their own hands. But at the same time, for those who are not able to vaccinate because they can't, I feel so much compassion for those folks because their lives are put on hold, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it for them. I don't know. What state was it that just passed the law that people who are vaccinated cannot get the monoclonal antibodies? Harmony? Pew! Pew, pew. I mean, I'm expecting to see a woman in a black mask go tumbling behind me. That's Harmony. She's on.
She is on it, yes. um I don't, I just, there's no stop and it's being perpetuated and it will continue to run downhill. I mean, the snowball is like one of those 1970 disaster movies where the snowball just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like there's never been a disaster like this ever in life, and people are like, well, I don't understand why there is no disaster. I don't understand, we've never seen anything like this. And it's it's morphing because it's not the same thing that it started as.
Right.
Like the Delta variant is like, that's so June, that Delta variant.
Like contagion telephone.
Right.
By the time it gets all the way around to next March, it'll be something totally different.
Right. It's like that Delta variant, that's so June 2021.
Good.
And it's like, but I also think that to speak to Robin, and
Sure.
Misty, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. Because you were buffering. I think that some hospital workers, nurses, doctors, I mean, obviously we know that doctors have God complexes. So I'm not saying that like because it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. Like, to be perfectly honest, if I'm having surgery, I actually want my surgeon to have a God complex. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you need them to be able to hear you. They have to hear you. I think if a surgeon has a God complex, and if you've ever worked with a neurosurgeon or a neurologist, they pretty much all do. The problem with the God complex is that you can't hear anything but you as yourself as in the role of God. That's not very patient-centered.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, and maybe there's like a hybrid, but I definitely want them to have no fear. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just where we're going, and then of course the reason that like our topic for today. So we have all of these people who are discussing that over there, and but then there's just all of this other regular stuff that's going on planet Earth, like SouthLake. Oh my gosh, Misty, that message that you sent me of that dude who wrote that email that she would that.
So, Chella Sanchez, friend of mine and of the show, obviously, she sent me a TikTok from one of the girls that goes to school, or maybe she just graduated, went to school at SouthLake. And she talked about how, the election has happened and what the new, because the conservatives won the election and they have now promoted their new agenda. A gentleman, we'll call him, wrote a note expressing how it's really important now that their agenda has won, that they really kind of stick it to the other side. And so what was it, a pro-white day? Something like that?
It wasn't pro-white, it was something
white.
Was, yeah. But it was like basically a day to celebrate whiteness.
Yes.
And all its glory and all of the things that white people have allowed other racist cultures to do.
Because, white people brought other people here, allowed other people to come into this country.
Yes, allowed.
Listen, peeps, if you, I will have, I'll send it to Harmony and see if she can post it in the chat. But I listened to this and I actually couldn't speak. All I could do was send Nicki a text. Watch this now. And I'm like texting like Fred Flintstone. I was so freaking mad.
Let's see if I can.
And
it was
weird.
Why I
was so pissed is because honestly, I think that's what, if we look at these new rules being put into place across the country in these school boards, once these conservatives win, because honestly, they really are the loudest and most savage voices out there. This is the type of thing we're looking at. So Harmony posted in the chat earlier, southlakefamilies.org, and I think that this is really interesting because now they have a political PAC. This is the Republicans. They have for a while, but you know, the idea that teaching social justice as a requirement for graduation is actually a bad thing. And, you know, creating a diversity police. Now, this says denying due process of students and teachers, creating an environment where you are guilty until proven innocent of microaggressions. I'm going to talk about that one for a second. And I'm going to try to keep my language clean, but I don't do that on the best and most happiest of days. And this subject really chaps my ass. So when we talk about, you know, denying due process of students and creating a diversity police. Now, Nicki, you and I have both been in situations where our children have been bullied. And I mean, I want to share, dear white people, I want to share with you what it's like when your Black child is being bullied by white people. And I say people because my child was bullied by adults at his school, and Nicki's was bullied by another child, but it was actually the adults that were the problem. So see, let's talk about due process. Your kid goes in and is all jacked up and has a situation, and this is what's happened, what happens to our children. Our children are told first, well, maybe you misunderstood. No, there's no misunderstanding. Bullying is bullying. You don't need due process. Bullying is bullying, and every school has anti-bullying measures and legislation or rules, and regulations that they just choose not to follow when certain kids are bullied, right?
Right.
And then
Correct.
You're guilty until proven innocent of microaggressions if the people who are administering the punishment, or we won't call it punishment because it really isn't, the conversation, if those folks don't recognize what a microaggression is in and of itself, then how the hell is anyone going to be held guilty or found guilty of a microaggression? It doesn't happen. Kids aren't found guilty of anything. And if anything, the kids of color are the ones that are basically gaslit into believing that somehow they did something wrong. Sorry, Nicki.
The other side of that too is some of the policy language is so, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation
intentionally
for what bullying is. So that school administrator, teacher, principal, like whomever is responsible for, you know, having the interaction with the kids, they can actually hear what's being said based on the student's experience, but they don't have to align it with bullying. Because bullying, okay, so like in a school system, they don't, so that's why hate speech, that's why, like, what was it, maybe like 15, 20 years ago at this point, when the idea of hate speech was so important because of its ability to incite. And that's why that, you know, the legislation and having something be considered a crime of race or what, you know what I'm trying, a hate crime. Jeez, Nikki. It's Friday. I'm like, sorry, it's Friday. That's why it was so important, because people were aligning what we now know and what many of us have experienced, the viciousness of hate crimes. People were aligning that with just regular, like, I don't like you, or get out of my store, you know. And so they were saying that those were equal, and the weight wasn't there. So that's why bullying in school, the term bullying, is supposed to have a certain level of weight, you know, and that weight is supposed to say, no, this is not just two kids who for 30 seconds during, you know, Mercury retrograde weren't getting along.
No.
This speaks to the weight of the incident or the experience. So,
and the accumulation of incidents.
Correct.
Wow.
Yes. And the accumulation of the harassment. And that is another very important point. ongoing, consistent harassment. So when the verbiage in the policy is not staunch, when it is not black and white, when it is not, this is what it is, this is what it isn't, that administrator can morph, shape, mold a circumstance that doesn't align with bullying.
And that, again, is intentional. The language is purposefully left vague, and you cannot make me believe otherwise. So don't even try. But having seen this, watched this, been through this, had students go through this, etc., etc. And listen, bullying is not always on racial lines. By the way, we should know this by now. In the
Correct.
South podcast, the one girl was being bullied for her sexual orientation. And again, the way they tried to gaslight her, the way they used nuances of speech to put her in the position of sounding like she was overly sensitive and perhaps a little crazy. This is what they do. They use vague language to be able to capitalize on any ambiguity and turn their position into the righteous one.
Yeah, and even more so, like that principal kept deflecting this poor girl's circumstance, and he was saying, "But you were a part of the conversation."
Right.
And
No, she said you had to accept.
You had, yeah, and it. The other issue was, in this day and age, there should be no school administrator who doesn't understand social media. Like there should be, a 19-year-old just sitting at the ready for when someone needs, because even and I don't think he is versed in social media. Like when I hear him, I don't believe this guy is versed in social media, but he was also using that to his advantage.
Yes, because P.S., every school has a social media account. If he didn't understand, it's a phone call.
Right. He was using that to his advantage, and he did a lot of things that were very not on par. Just with, at this point, there should be no middle school and up that is not versed in all types of social media. That's number one. And number two, he isolated her. There were so many different levels of manipulation. The culprits, the people who did very bad things, they got to have these meetings with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
These took place on Zoom. So they got to have these meetings with their parents. He did not invite her parents to the meeting.
Right.
She had to have so he, not only was she violated, and she was violated again by the principal. Because they had these meetings with their parents and they got to tell their side of what they were doing, capitalizing on the fact that they knew their principal was not social media savvy. And then he brought their kind of their view, like
he talked to
their narrative. Their narrative got to lead, even though she was the one who instigated and initiated the complaint against them.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of manipulation. He furthered the assault. He literally exponentially increased the level of assault, and gave validity to the boys and their position.
100%.
And that was a dangerous precedent to set, because it wasn't just, it was her gender, it was her sexual orientation, And she wasn't able to have like just be protected, you know, like just to have the comfort of her parents, who her parents, like I was like, yay, they were like really, you know, they were like super super supportive of their kid. And it's an important thing to say because she's not you know, heterosexual. um I can't remember what she identified as. It was a couple of things, and y'all know I can't remember all those things.
I believe, but I'm not sure. Either way, the point of the matter is that, you know, and this happened to me in my situation personally, you know, typically you get information from both sides and then you bring everybody together. And they never did that. She was the one that initiated the complaint, but like you said, they never spoke to her parents. Why is it, yes, her, they, why is it that those particular parents, those other parents, were heard above hers? You know,
Right.
there's supposed to be a level of impartiality from an administrator of a school, and nobody is 100% impartial, let's be real. But at the same time, can't you just fake it at least to get through a conversation? You can listen to this girl and tell that she was completely traumatized by this situation, and all he did was basically give her a cookie and send her on her way. Like, to me, as a parent, I found that to be aberrant.
Oh, I don't think he gave her a cookie. I think he was trying to convince her to bake them cookies and give them cookies.
Oh no, it was like, you know, I'm hearing what you're saying. If you take this cookie and go away, we can just pretend it didn't happen. That, I mean, he did not, he tried to pin her down into a corner. Once he realized she got upset and wasn't talking anymore because she was done, then it was, oh, well, you know, okay, that's great, see you later. When it should not have been that. And I just don't, in all of these years, these bullying situations are not getting any better. But in this case, when bullying is happening from the adults, the administration, I get pissed. I'm sorry that you're upset, as she's crying. That's what he said. I'm sorry that you are upset. Not, I'm sorry that you were in this situation where you were attacked by
Right.
other kids. He never gave her any sort of verification or appreciation of the fact that she had trauma. He
Right.
never did.
Validation. He did not validate her
Validation.
trauma or her, yes, I knew what you meant. He
Really,
did not validate her experience or, and then it was
he
really
made it her
interesting
fault.
because it's the same principle. And so the level of misogyny that this principal has, because the previous, and
The
they
first
do speak
episode,
about this, in the first episode where the girl goes in, black girl, he speaks to how pretty she is and she shouldn't be worried about this stuff.
you're so
And
smart, so pretty.
right,
Those
the
kids aren't.
girls, the girls are relegated to their very stereotypical places, while the boys are, their behavior is not, um, the principal refuses in both cases to say that this is what these boys did and said.
Yeah.
He refuses to say it. And then one is in writing, and that's the horrible part, because one is in writing. So it's not, it's not kind of sort of could have been misconstrued. One is in writing. It's a sequences of text messages where she does not respond, and this is the she does not respond. Like, well, they said that, and she's like, but it was discussion, and they wanted to have this conversation to get different sides, and she's like, but this is not how a discussion goes. Yes, Harmony,
They
he
never
referred
asked
to
a
her as
question.
sweetie. So even in terms of, because it kind of tells you what is acceptable in this town, and that's my point in that, is that there's what's going on racially and with a sexual orientation, which are these bigger, more overt things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the level of misogyny, even from the white male principal, is so like, it's like slapping you in the face with a wet noodle, like then a whole bucket full of wet noodles. And I'm like, oh my God, this dude is so incredibly misogynist. And then you're like, oh crap, he is wholly indicative of the men in this town.
And if you listen to the school board meetings, this is very clear. I mean, the women are a whole ball of wax unto themselves, but the men of this town are very special characters. But I want to, one of the other points that really got me going on this, and like I said, Harmony posted in the chat, the southlakefamilies.org page. One of the other things they say is the problem with all of this diversity business is that it will inhibit the ability to always hire the most qualified teachers by prioritizing race over experience. Now,
Ooh.
Ooh. If I had my hoops on, I'd be taking them off right now, because that is coded language.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say it again.
It's not even coded. I don't even feel like it's coded. They just said black people aren't qualified, brown people aren't qualified.
Would not miss that. That would miss that. Some people miss the nuance of it. So it's another dear white people moment. When something like that is said, we know what you're saying. What you're saying is that any minority candidate is a mercy candidate, somebody that you are giving the job out of the goodness of your own Southern heart. Bless your heart. I can't even do it because it's just so gross. And you know, this is another thing, because if this is the way, and the people that make these weren't attorneys that came up with these points, these are citizens of the town. If this is the way the town citizens, the community, we're always about community, Nicki. If this is the way the community sees its minority residents. And don't forget, in the video, the Asian guy screaming and yelling about how, you know, he doesn't want to be seen as a minority. Well, pisser balls, I wouldn't want to be seen as a minority either if this is the way people are treated in this town.
I think that statement, that the statement about, and this is very important in diversity. I often say some people don't see beyond their shade of brown. And the reason why that statement is important is because he's basically saying, the particular gentleman in this, I am not saying this about all Asians. No. I always have to have a disclaimer. There's in this podcast, there's a particular, I believe he is Vietnamese.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not, he's like, I believe he's Vietnamese, but he doesn't want the spotlight cast on him. He doesn't want people to begin to turn and see his shade of brown, because he's been able to be in and be accepted by these people to a degree that is acceptable to him and his family.
Hey, they always see because they're not blind.
Yes, they also do this. There are Latino groups who do this as well, and it is, and is it every Latino? No, it is not. But there are Latino groups who say, we don't have an issue with being in this country. We don't have an issue with the way we're treated. Okay, so two things there. Again, some people don't see beneath their shade of brown. That's one thing. And that's very dangerous, because it leaves the darkest people at the bottom and unprotected.
This gets back to the idea of colorism. Just so if you've heard that, you haven't really been able to figure out what it means. In a lot of communities of color, you know, white people are like, ooh, let me get as brown as I can and catch myself out on fire out here in the sun in baby oil. I want to get as brown as I can get. In many minority communities, it's completely the opposite. Can I please bathe in bleach? For how long can I bathe in bleach? And this really is a thing. For how long can I bathe in bleach before it becomes toxic to me? Skincare regimens in places like Africa, Korea, Japan, even here in the United States,
India,
bleaching is so important, because the lighter you are, the more value you have within the society. It can
Right.
inhibit your ability to get a job if you're dark. So what Nicki is saying about the darkest shade is really important in minority communities.
Yeah. The other thing is, um, a lot of people from South America, they are trying to get into this country. And so I want to be clear, I don't really care who lives in this country. I really don't. Like, I don't, I don't, that's not my issue.
No.
My issue is people, whatever shit show is going on in their country, it is so bad that they view this as a better place. See, that's a different perspective when you're coming into this country or you're trying to get into this country, right? That's a different perspective than having to live ancestrally because your people were forced to be in this country. And
Sure.
so that's a very different perspective. So when the Latinos, and there's that big catch-all phrase, people of color. When some Latinos say, I'm fine, and there is a gentleman in this podcast who speaks in this manner, he does not feel othered. That's great. But now the people who know he is other, he's lumping everyone in. They're lumping everyone that, oh, there's a whole group of people of color. Well, this dude over here, he's Latino. He says he doesn't feel othered. Now we're all people of color. You see what happens? So because this guy is saying he doesn't feel othered, that now gets carried over into other groups that are being full on othered. This is my issue. Everyone knows this. This is my issue with the term people of color. Mm-hmm. Because Misty likes it, and I actually, I completely respect the reason that she likes it, because she's like, well, all these, people of color need to join together and, do the do. But people are also using it to mesh everyone together. Whites are over here, and everyone else is a person of color. So then when you are a person of color who says, I'm not being othered, you have now just spoken for everyone according to the whites.
I think that it's way more nuanced than that. I think that is a tactic made by people who aren't that bright and who don't necessarily understand the politics of it, which is fair, because listen, everyone's looking for the low-hanging fruit, and that kind of argument is the low-hanging fruit. But in my point of view, again, when we look at the fact that the people of the global majority, which is all of the people of color, outnumber those who are not of color, who are colorless, I think we need to stop thinking like we are in these, little mouse houses here and there, little pods, and start thinking globally. And that's why I like the term, though people of the global majority is a much better term in my mind. And listen, you're always going to have outliers. You're always going to have the people like, I'm maybe black, but I am 39.7% less black than you, and therefore I'm better, or whatever it is. You're always going to have those people. I just say, pay them no mind. Eventually, they're going to be in a position where they need you, and handle them then. Candace Owens.
And I think it just what you said to me the other day when that woman called you about the R. Kelly verdict. And I know it's not SouthLake, but it just popped into my head, because I was like, that woman who was black, correct? Mm-hmm. She has decided that you're not black enough.
100%. So
and you're not black enough because you don't fight for education, or because you don't believe in what do you call it, with the equalizer for work, for career.
The equalizer for career?
Yeah, for black people. Affirmative action. No. That's not her focus. Her focus isn't on, like, these really
important issues,
impactful issues, right? R. Kelly was convicted. Yay, rah. It was a long time coming. Rick DeMoranis, that's his name. No, that's not his name, but it is Rick. He is the music guy on NPR. He has been talking about, and I say this because he's a white guy. He has been talking about R. Kelly for close to a decade, and he's like, why isn't anyone talking about what's going on with these girls? And he, the white guy, said, is it because they're black? So here's a white guy saying this does not look good, smell good, feel good. There's something wrong. So if you're from Chicago, then if you're from Chicago and you were born in the late 70s and you were going to high school around that time in a couple of very specific high schools, then you've known about R. Kelly. I've known about R. Kelly for, ooh, good Lord, 20 years. And you heard about it, you saw it, you witnessed it. But there are some people who are incredibly loyal to this man, regardless of his gross and not hidden proclivities. And a lot of them are black.
Most of them.
There's some white and Latino people in the mix.
I don't know.
Yeah,
no white or Latino person's ever called me a white girl because I'm supporting.
A lot of them are black. And so a black woman looked at a man who was raping and holding hostage black girls. He had an entourage that would support his behavior. He was R. Kelly, or he is R. Kelly. And a black woman looked at another black woman and told her she was basically white because she said that R. Kelly should, what did you say, Misty? Because you goofy. He should die and come back to life.
I mean, it was a long thing that included, him being, terrorized, shot, set on fire, buried, resurrected, exorcised, and then forced to watch Caillou. I mean,
that's what it was. And so this woman called Misty out and basically thwarted her blackness because she didn't support a man who rapes and holds hostage young black girls.
Because clearly my white ancestors hung people from trees, and I am getting over that racial trauma myself.
And I would say again, if anybody watched the show on HBO, I did, because I was curious, because some of the players we were familiar with, just if you lived in Chicago. And being a dancer, I had friends who danced and actually danced for R. Kelly. But it was no secret. It was no secret. I know someone who had a baby by him in high school, and I didn't understand it because I was freaking a sophomore in high school, so I didn't get it. And I was young in high school. I graduated high school when I was 17, just as a weird birthday thing. So I really didn't understand it, and then it dawned on me like later on. I was like, oh shit, like I got it. So this is what is important. And there is national news that we're talking about. It's been coming out, like all these missing black women, right? All these missing black women, and how they don't get the notoriety of the news media and the way that white women, and especially blonde white women, do. These are all things that are already in our orbit. So to add on to that, school systems, yes, thank you, Harmony, Survivor. Thank you. I'd probably say HBO, some streaming service.
I had no idea which one.
I know. I was like, some streaming service. Yeah, it's gross. And the stuff that if you watch this, what you see in there, and you realize how many people allowed it to happen, it's not, I don't feel like it's even the tip of the iceberg. I feel like what they captured on this show is not even right.
Considering the amount of time that he had and the amount of protection he had with all of his random disgustingness, there were a lot of people in a lot of really high circles in the music industry that
Mm-hmm.
really made sure that that man was protected. So you can imagine, if you think about what Weinstein did,
Right.
this guy had that kind of access, no doubt.
And so what I think is interesting is his celebrity and especially for what he did, right? He's a black guy singer. His celebrity insulated him. And
Sure.
it's also a stereotype of what black men are supposed to be, that are acceptable. That's the other thing, right? It's also the stereotype of what black men are supposed to be. The music guy, we know the sports guys,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's actually brought up in SouthLake. We talked about it where kids would go to school, and the white kids would look at the black kids and be like, "What number is your dad? Like what's his sports number?"
Right.
These are
You can't afford to live
the
there if you're not a professional athlete and you're black.
or and you are, oh, if your dad plays sports, if your dad is a celebrity, not necessarily synonymous, then you're an acceptable black person.
Well,
These are there's like this list of, if your dad does this and this, then you're okay here. We can, and so to me, for another black woman to open her mouth and say that because a serial child molester is convicted after decades of abuse, to question the blackness of another black woman.
listen, it wasn't that big of a deal to me because, this girl clearly thought she was winning something, and she wasn't. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But what got me about it, what I thought was so funny, was one, she's clearly vision impaired, and two, more importantly, like you're saying, defending a pedophile is so important to you.
Serial
Serial
pedophile.
is so, being able to play his songs with joy is more important to you than standing up for other women.
Yes.
This is where we shoot ourselves in the foot as women, folks. This is why we have issues. Like, we need to do better for each other, but that's a different story. We can talk about that one next week.
And the woman who tried to say stuff, Sparkle, who was an up and coming musician in Chicago, he crushed her.
Right.
He crushed her. And he crushed her. He crushed her whole entire career. So the woman who tried to stand up to her,
again and again, men protect men. Look at Weinstein. Look at all the women whose careers were crashed at the hands of Harvey Weinstein. It's the same thing. Men and their peeps, they go crazy, and instead of, again, believing in each other as women, we choose to tend to do what? Protect our status, protect our playlist, whatever it is. We have to do better. We just
Cuomo's assistant.
Oy.
Cuomo's assistant
supported.
I mean, complicit. Not just turn the other way. She's full on complicit. Now, who are these people? Well, guess what, guys? These are some of the same women who are saying you don't need an abortion. These are some of the same women who are saying who are wholly complicit in school circumstances like SouthLake.
Right. And, once again, as long as my kid gets to do the fill in the blank, then that's all that matters. Heaven forbid my kid have to read something that makes them uncomfortable, which gets me to the hidden history component. When we talk about things like not teaching real history, fully whole encompassing history, instead just teaching this watered down bullshit that's not really even a quarter of the story that we teach. What are we doing, one, to all of the kids? you've got one group of kids that feel like they can do wrong, and you've got another group of kids who feel like they can do no right. You are reinforcing the hierarchy that exists. And on top of it, we're lying. I was talking to Glenn about this the other day. Gerald, one of my friends on Facebook, posted this story about how Mount Rushmore and Stone Mountain, those monuments carved into the mountains, were funded by the Klan. And I was like, bullshit, that can't be right. Now, I don't know why, for some reason, on this particular issue, I decided to have hope. I mean, I'm not new. I wasn't born last night. But yet, for some reason, I was like, I can't believe this. So lo and behold, I do a search. And I'm not finding this from like Victor Periwinkle's School of History. This is history.com. This is the Smithsonian. All of these reputable sources of history say that it is so. And so I'm reading about this and I'm thinking, this is important history that we need to know. Everybody needs to know it. People are screaming and yelling about the destruction of Confederate monuments. This is why they're complaining. They don't know, and they probably don't care. But
it was also done against the treaty, wasn't it? It should not be there. It was done against the treaty.
Mount Rushmore absolutely was not supposed to be done. And in fact, in 1980, the tribes were awarded by the Supreme Court some sort of settlement, which I'm sure they didn't receive because they never get them. But, again, if it looks to you like all of the hubbub about historical monuments is nothing, if you just do a simple Google search, like stop Google searching best pedicures in your little town and instead really
best mani-pedi near me.
I mean, one of my favorites. However, you have to understand the depth of the history that we're missing to really recognize why this is so important. We have had how many generations come through school thinking that these were truly monuments to demonstrate the greatness of America. It has nothing to do with America. Stone Mountain was built. They were able to raise money for Stone Mountain off of Birth of a Nation, the movie. If you don't know what Birth of a Nation is, you've not been listening to us long enough. Look that up. But that is part of what funded Stone Mountain, which is a monument to the Klan. Read about it. We need to learn. And what this legislation, what these terroristic school board fights are doing, what they're doing is ensuring that the true story is never told.
Right.
History was one of my favorite subjects, history and religion, actually, in college, even though those weren't my majors. But because I felt like finally somebody's telling me the truth. Like so many things just didn't make any sense to me. But why does anybody have to wait until college?
Right.
I was spending a lot of fucking money for that shit in college. I should have gotten that with my high school education. So I could have done other things. I'm kidding.
Well, and it's just fraught with gaps though too. It's the foundation of what we are learning. It just isn't there. The foundation of what our kids is learning. And it's sort of like, if you really look at history, it's sort of like this thing just happened right here. And you're like, really? How did it just get there?
Well,
this just happened right here.
We went from Mesopotamia, Egypt, Dark Ages, come to America, industrialization, Civil War, Reconstruction, all that shit. And then Martin Luther King, and then it's all better now. Like, no, it didn't happen that way.
Yeah, and it's the best. I think one of the best, most poignant examples for me is the women's right to vote, and I'm like, no, and it's national, and it'll show up on the Google headboard or whatever it's called And
Women's suffrage.
yeah, and I'm like, yeah, no. I'm
Yeah.
like, no.
Margaret Sanger, she was a big part of that
And
too.
I'm like, no.
Uh-huh.
And they say it like it's gospel, and they say it like it incorporates all women. And I'm like, yeah, no, one of those you got to jump to the 60s. And
60s.
yes, and not only that, but they literally squashed Black and Indigenous women to get it.
Literally held hands until it was time to sign off. And they're like,
Yep.
we got to sacrifice something. Peace out, browns and blacks. We time for you. We'll catch you later. And then
Like they
again,
literally squashed them with their big old skirts and bustles. They literally were like, no, you shall not pass. And so there are these big gaping holes, and it's not good. It's a misunderstanding of what people actually know, what they're supposed to know, what would be instrumental for them to know. And I know that that's what you're saying when you say it affects all of us.
Yeah.
Because I do know white people who are mad because they're like, why didn't I know this? Why didn't I know this? I know white people who are very like, oh, here's that big boulder of information that was Texan, and now I understand how this got to this. There are white people who are like, I don't understand. I don't get it. Why was that omitted?
One of the girls that went through my Beyond the Bullshit course sent me a message yesterday, and she was like, once the doors open, you just have to keep going. You have to learn more. And, I just can't stop since these conversations that we've had. Mm-hmm. And, I loved hearing that, because that's the way I want everybody to feel, not just because it benefits me, but it benefits our children. It benefits everybody to know, everyone talks about the big lie as being the current nonsense with that former thing that ran the country for a minute. Mm-hmm. But it's not even, that's just a continuation of the eternal gaslighting. That's what we've been taught. And, if somebody says that my perspective on that is anti-American, then, that's their choice to believe. But, land of the free, home of the brave, if we're not going to put an asterisk on it, then we should probably spend time learning what it really means. Don't you think? And back to the whole point, what you were making about suffrage, just to throw that out there. Because of
where'd you go?
What was that?
No, you kind of cut out for a minute.
Oh, I'm back. Oh, now you're buffering, so I don't know what's going on around here. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. The point of the story is we have to know all of that to understand why the voters' rights situation is a big deal too. We have to understand why voter ID is a big deal. Because a lot of people don't recognize that the situation with voter ID, it's not just about having a driver's license and going and get it, having an official ID and going to
right.
Way more than that. And in a lot of states, it's, they'll accept these two IDs, not this ID. These two IDs are held by 97% of the white people in the state, but this other two IDs are only held by the majority of Black people in the state, or the majority of the people who have them in the state are Black. Now, they can serve as official IDs in many other places, but they're not allowed to serve as official IDs for voting. And why do I bring this up? Because if you go back to Jim Crow, if you go to, especially throughout the 50s with IDs and poll taxes and all of these other things that they did, that's what they did. Certain people were not allowed to get certain IDs, and therefore they were not allowed to vote because that was the only ID that was accepted. So again, it all comes back to history.
Yes. And it's also just get the documents required to get the qualifying ID. So for instance, if you were born to a midwife, depending on, especially below the Mason-Dixon line. My grandfather was born to a midwife. He's now deceased. But he was born to a midwife, so there's no documentation. Miss May just came by your house when somebody ran to go get her, and he didn't have a birth certificate.
Somebody ran to
Well, somebody ran to go get her and said, baby's coming. Do you know how many people where they're like, well, we think he was born on this day.
Sure, ancestry. It's like
right
somewhere around, yeah.
Right. And so like we just got this really cool thing. My cousin has it. We just got this really cool thing from my father's grandfather. So that would be my great grandfather. Looking just about as white as he can be, but it's hilarious because the birth date is April and whatever year he was born. There's no date. It's just April. They're like, he was born in April. So it's like, so the stipulations put into place for these very specific documents for ID, by default, Black babies in some instances, in some periods of time, they weren't born in hospitals. It wasn't even something that they could do.
Today in some of those backwater towns.
Yeah.
Scratch my
and so
Alabama.
Asking someone for a birth certificate, and then you're automatically at a certain age range, right? We know that these are people who are probably in their 80s, 90s, upwards of their hundreds. Go back literally 100 years to the town that you were born in and find your birth certificate, or that county, right? That hall of records, that county record, that recorder of records. It's basically like you might as well just say you can't vote. And that's not what voting is supposed to be. Voting was supposed to be is if you are a citizen of this country, it was your right to vote. You weren't supposed to have to prove any of this stuff.
It's the cost of citizenship.
Right.
And, I think that I do believe that voting is a responsibility, even if you've got nothing but trash to vote for.
Correct.
You still have to, throw your hat in the ring for a particular variety of trash, because
right.
at the end of the day, if it's truly a republic or representative republic or democracy or whatever we're calling it this week, you have to make sure that you are being represented. And that's
right.
the way to do it. And if you don't like it, then you get involved in your local politics and you make change at that level. But you have to do something. These people that say that I don't vote, that's a different story. But all of it plays into the hands of the foul miscreants that are trying to steal elections.
I love that word.
It's one of my favorite words.
Miscreants.
Yeah. Well, Nicki, I know that you've got to shake it down today. Nicki's got some busy stuff happening in her world.
I do.
But guys, thank you for joining us today. We're back to Thursday next week, I do believe.
Yes.
Looking forward to it, of course. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. in the middle of nowhere. Or Chicago. Thank you, everyone, for playing.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.
I'm going to go work on my plants for a little bit before I get back to teaching. So, adieu.